Greetings, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. After the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, the administration of Donald Trump demands from the acting Venezuelan heads of state Delcy Rodriguez to expel Cuban, Iranian and other agents of countries hostile to the United States from the country and stop selling Venezuelan oil to America's opponents. For the People's Republic of China, which is the main buyer of Venezuelan oil, this demand from Washington is unlikely to be a serious test. Venezuelan oil makes up a small amount of the oil that the People's Republic of China buys in general. In general, I would consider China's purchases of Venezuelan oil to be more of a gesture of support for the regime of Nicolas Maduro of the People's Republic of China. Support in exchange, of course, for political loyalty, which the new Venezuelan regime, if it is formed in the event of the collapse of Chavismo, is unlikely to be able to afford. The situation in the Russian Federation is completely different, the leadership of which was going to divide in the future. Revenues from Venezuelan oil with the leadership of this country. And here we are no longer talking about support as such, but about mutual benefit. After all, the Russian state-owned company Rosneft, headed by Vladimir Putin's closest ally Igor Sechin, invested in the development of Venezuelan oil fields, and thus counted on the profit from the extraction of Venezuelan oil. In a situation where Rosneft itself is under the sanctions of the United States, and is forced to look for mechanisms to circumvent such sanctions, revenues from Venezuelan oil are also, of course, illegal. Could be an important help for Igor Sechin's empire. But now this, apparently, will not happen. The Trump administration will demand that the Venezuelan leadership return oil assets to American companies that have lost their positions in the Venezuelan market after the regime of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro came to power. In general, it is quite interesting to see that the entire Russian state oil capital is based on theft. Rosneft itself emerged after Vladimir Putin and his entourage took the Yukos from Mikhail Khodorkovsky. It was after this that the capacity of a private company were divided between the state and loyal to the Putin regime oligarchs and Igor Sechin, who served Vladimir Putin for many years. During the years of the future Russian president's work in St. Petersburg, suddenly turned into so-called a state oligarch. Although there are no real efforts to create an oil industry in the Russian Federation, neither Sechin nor those close to him, who turned out to be at the head of Rosneft, of course, not attached. And in the future, about the same experiment was conducted by the Kremlin with Venezuela. After all, we are well aware that Rosneft invested in the oil industry, which was taken away from the oil companies of the United States by the leftist regime of Chavez and Maduro. And, by the way, it has been rendered unusable. As, however, in the Russian Federation itself, we can talk about some kind of intensive development of the oil industry. The industry does not have to. In order to understand how to really develop this industry, we need both competence, which, as we understand, Igor Sechin and the staff of the state-owned company lack, and the absence of Western sanctions, which in themselves hinder the development of the oil industry. But the sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, in turn, will force these Russian companies to refuse to increase oil production. even close existing deposits. A completely natural lesson for those who believed that it was possible to make billions of dollars on the theft of other people's property. In this case, we can talk not only about the geopolitical defeat, not only on the demonstration of the administration of Donald Trump, that Moscow's allies should not expect the political possibilities of Vladimir Putin, because the owner of the Kremlin. There are, quite simply, no such opportunities. And that is why the fate of Nicolas Maduro, who was abducted in his own residence in Caracas, is not much different from the fate of former Syrian President Bashar, forced to flee to Moscow amid the rapid destruction of his misanthropic repressive regime. There is a much more serious economic component for Russia, although, perhaps, for Putin, who knows little about economic realities, it is not so important. But it will be important for the Russian budget and for the feeling that Russia will soon have any additional earning opportunities on someone else's stolen oil. It won't stay at all, because it is another important country for Russian investments, and by the way, another country in which China helps with oil purchases. Is Iran. We can talk about such an axis of gas stations supplying the People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela. But in Iran, as we see, there are also mass uprisings of citizens protesting against the withdrawal, the life and tyrannical policy of the regime. And it is quite possible that in the near future, even if Tehran manages to keep control of the country, it will not help the development of the oil and refining industry at all. So Russia can only rely on its own oil companies, whose revenue even before the introduction of the latest Trump sanctions fell by about 70%. And this is a fall from the mountain. It will continue as the confrontation of the Putin regime with the civilized world continues and Russia's war against Ukraine continues. Although I have serious doubts that Vladimir Putin, in his current political state, is generally able to draw adequate conclusions from what is happening. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel. Subscribe to it. Subscribe to my social networks, to channels in Patreon, Ko-fi, and Donatel, which help to develop these resources. Use of sponsorship in the YouTube. Peace to you.